Good morning. Right now we only have three attendees. We're gonna wait a couple minutes to see if several other people hop on. For those that just joined, we're gonna wait a couple more minutes to see if any more attendees join us a couple minutes late. Well, I'll start with the introductions now, and hopefully more people start filtering in. All right. Welcome to the Drought Task Force, the second task force meeting. I'm going to go through the housekeeping. We have everything's going to be on Zoom Q&A. Participants have been muted, and so please use the Q&A feature. If you do have issues, I'm going to ask that you send emails to the SB 552 Drought Resiliency Plan at venturacounty.gov. It's the website it's the email address off the website that you click the Zoom link. So please email us if you're having Q&A issues, because we do want to hear from you. And we'll bring up your questions throughout. And all questions will be answered and published throughout the presentation. If time allows, we'll address questions live at the end. All right. What is the County of Ventura Drought Resiliency Plan? The purpose is the County of Ventura Drought Resiliency Plan evaluates potential drought and water shortage risks and provides emergency and interim solutions for water shortages, fulfilling Senate Bill 552, the drought planning for small water suppliers, state small water systems, and domestic well communities requirements. The scope is the drought resiliency plan applies exclusively to domestic well and state water systems within the county. This is not the forum for discussing general drought planning and water conservation. If this is something you are interested in, please email us and we will help route you to the appropriate groups for those discussions. So to define what a state small water system is, it's a system for the provision of piped water to public for human consumption that serves at least 5, but not more than 14 service connections, and does not regularly serve drinking water to more than an average of 25 individuals daily for more than 60 days out of the year. It's defined in section 11625 of the Health and Safety Code. And then domestic well is defined as a groundwater well used to supply water for the domestic needs of an individual residence or a water system that is not public water system that has no more than 4 service connections as defined in section 116681 of the Health and Safety Code. We're going to move on to our to what all of this is about. And these items are on our website the same website that you joined the Zoom meeting for. We have a drought task force charter that is posted. It describes the roles, responsibilities, membership, and decision-making authorities of the county, the PCT, and the task force. And it includes a communication engagement framework. The actual water shortage task force is consistent with the California Water Code section 10609.70A1. And the county shall establish a standing county drought and water shortage task force to facilitate drought and water shortage preparedness for state small water systems and domestic wells within the county's jurisdiction, and shall invite representatives from the state and other local governments, including groundwater sustainability agencies and community-based organizations, local water suppliers, and local residents to participate in the task force. And so we will introduce who the panelists are today. I believe let's introduce ourselves so that people can see and hear other people besides myself. So first on the list is Anastasia.
My name is Anastasia Symes. I am the Engineering Services Director in Public Works.
All right, I am Shauna Schlagater. I'm in the County Executive Office. Kim, you're up next.
Hey, I'm Kim Delacourt. I'm an emergency manager with the Ventura County Sheriff's Office of Emergency Services.
John?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm John Gauthier. I'm with the Public Works Agency in the groundwater section.
Timothy?
Hi, I'm Timothy Crone with Ventura County Environmental Health, and I regulate the state small water systems and evaluate private wells.
And then Shelley will be joining us in a couple of minutes. We knew that she was going to be delayed, and she is with the RMA Planning Division. Stantec?
Hi, my name is Rena Buck-McLeod, and I'm a water resources engineer at Stantec, and I'm supporting the county with development of the drought resilience plan. And then Emily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Huang. I am the county deputy CSP lead and supporting the development of the drought resilience plan alongside Rena.
And it looks like we have someone from the California Department of Water Resources. Oh, actually, I realize I have to promote who to talk.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name's Sarah Coe. I'm with the California Department of Water Resources in our Water Justice Office. We are supporting Stantec through our Direct Technical Assistance Program for SB 552. And they might get into it today. I manage the water shortage vulnerability tool, and I also oversee everything SB 552.
Thank you, Sarah. And the County Drought Task Force is in compliance with SB 552. The county has invited representatives from the state and other local governments, including groundwater sustainability agencies and community-based organizations, local water suppliers, and local residents to participate in this task force. I noticed that there are people on the call today or on the meeting today attending that are not on our task force. So we just want to show how easy it is to join the task force. From our website, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a section that's to join the task force. You just enter your name, your email address, and you click I would like to subscribe. At any time you do not want to be on the task force, you do the same process and click I would like to unsubscribe. It can take up to 90 days for us to remove you, but we only send necessary emails. We're not spamming you with unnecessary information or data. And on that note, I would love to introduce Rena Buck-McLeod and Emily Hung from Stantec to take away the rest of this presentation.
Thank you, Shauna. All right, so I'm going to take this first section, which is the recap of the drought resilience plan development process. So here's an arrow, just a visual of kind of where we've been and where we're going. So starting from the left, the Drought Task Force was established, as summarized by Shauna, what the Drought Task Force entails. And then at our last meeting, we discussed the risk assessment, and that is what Sarah from DWR had mentioned about the water shortage vulnerability tool and explorer. So we presented the risk assessment at the last meeting. And then the third step is aligning actions and strategies of how the county can respond to droughts and water shortages in response to the risks that were identified in the risk assessment. And then the next step is completing the drought resilience plan. So where we are right now is the drought resilience plan the draft went to the task force for review that concluded last week. And we were soliciting feedback from the review process and also in the meeting today. So we're in this step of completing the drought resilience plan to memorialize the process and outcomes for future use. And then the arrow at the bottom is showing that the task force continues supporting monitoring and implementation within the county. So it's supposed to be a standing task force. So thank you, Emily. Next slide. Perfect. And then this slide, we wanted to just provide a snapshot of task force engagement and outreach to help define what's been done to date. So the top row shows the drought resilience plan development, and we show that we developed the draft and it went out for review in February and March. And then, as you can see at the top, we're in the process following this meeting of developing the final. And then the orange boxes are showing the task force outreach. We show that a website was established in the beginning of the year. Emails were sent to invite participants to the task force, and then phone calls were made in early this year to engage state small water systems through direct outreach, and postcards were mailed to all the domestic well users as well. So lots of different avenues for engagement for the task force to try to engage additional participation and get the valuable input that task force members can provide. And then this arrow, the blue arrow, shows that the standing task force has been established and will be engaged, and we'll describe more as needed going forward. And then the final lower third of the figure shows the meetings the task force meetings that have been held to date. So task force 1 meeting was held in January, and it introduced the drought resilience plan and presented the content in the drought resilience plan, which we'll be going over today as well, soliciting feedback. And then we're now at task force 2 meeting, the intention to get feedback and discuss next steps for the task force. And then I'm just going to do a quick overview. The intention is to solicit feedback on the drought resilience plan. So we're just providing an overview to help kind of prime the conversation. This is an overview of what is required for the drought resilience plan. So as defined by Senate Bill 552, SB 552, that Shauna had summarized earlier. So the plan elements must include potential drought and water shortage risks, also proposed interim and long-term solutions for state smalls and domestic wells throughout the county. And then minimum considerations, which we'll get into more, must include consolidations for existing water systems and domestic wells, domestic well drinking water mitigation programs, provision of emergency and interim drinking water solutions, analysis of the steps necessary to implement the plan, analysis of funding sources available. So all these minimum considerations will be walking through the drought resilience plan and showing how the plan fulfills these minimum considerations, and then also soliciting any additional task force feedback. Thank you. And then this is just an overview of how the requirements fit into the chapters that we're going to be walking through in just 1 minute. So, and that the task force was also provided for review. And it's also posted, I should mention, on the task force website. The PDF is available of this plan. So in an effort to solicit some feedback and present the work that's been done, and where we were going to pull up the PDF of the actual plan itself, just to provide quick overview of mainly chapters 1 and 2 will just be informative, and then really hoping that using this time for task force feedback on chapters 4, 5, and 6, or 3 through 6 actually. So really trying to identify any additional information for the risk assessment in chapter 3, or the short-term response and long-term response actions in chapters 4 and 5, and then walking through the implementation considerations in chapter 6 to see if there's any additional information we should be including. All right, so now we're going to get into the feedback discussion, and we're going to walk through the drought resilience plan. Thank you, Emily. All right. So chapter 1 is really the introduction, which outlines the purpose of the document and the organization of the document. So it's introductory, the upfront information, and it includes legislative requirements as well. And then next page, we're just going to kind of high level go through chapter 1 and 2. So this includes the county requirements, state involvement, and then provides also an overview, kind of like a existing conditions or a setting kind of conversation of the county itself, providing an overview of water supply, geology, geography, as we move forward to help any readers who aren't as familiar with the county, everyone be on the same page of what we're looking at for the county. So here's an overview of the county.
I'm going to step in for 1 second.
Oh, sure.
If
Yeah.
anybody that's attending has a question, you can either send it through the Q&A or raise your hand as we're going through. Just a quick note. So this is part of the discussion.
Yes, thank you. Yes. So this is thanks, Shauna. That's a great point. Overview of the county, demographics, helping us provide the setting, the topography. And then as we keep going, this is land use and geology, helping define the county's physical features. And then as we move forward, as this a more detailed look at the water landscape in the county, defining the different HUC units of the watersheds within the county itself, and then talking through major sources of water supply for the county, water use, and water management actions to move forward. And then as this is very closely related to groundwater, we have a more detailed section on groundwater and the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and the different groundwater basins within the county and the status of those basins and their groundwater sustainability plans. Here's an overview of the groundwater basins within the county and then their status and priority depending on the water supply. And then there are also required groundwater monitoring wells that are demonstrated here throughout the county. And then this is a kind of an inventory of the domestic wells and small water systems within the county as they relate to the groundwater basins. And then this is a figure showing the groundwater basins overlaying with the state small water systems and domestic wells. So that was a high level overview of the setting chapter, wanting to see if any comments came through or any questions during that high level review of the county and the purpose.
Nothing yet.
Okay, great. And the focus, as I had mentioned, we really are soliciting feedback on the chapters, the risk assessment and the actions and strategies. So I'm trying to get through this to allow more time. Oh, I see a hand up. All right. Yes.
All right, you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So hi everyone, I'm Bram Surku. I'm a water resources supervisor with United Water Conservation District. I spent some time reviewing the first couple chapters. I just hadn't gotten time to go through all of it.
Totally.
But I do noted some inaccuracies and maybe statements that were out of date. Can I provide those in writing or by email? Do I have a little bit extra time?
Yeah, that would be great. Do you think that it's realistic to get something in the next day or so over to the?
How about by end of Thursday?
End of Thursday? Today's
Yeah.
Tuesday? Yeah, that would be great. And I think that's a great point. Thank you for providing feedback. And then also a good point that maybe this will jog some additional feedback beyond anything that was provided during the comment period. So extending through Thursday, if something comes up following the meeting, there's the email that's on the website that comments could be provided to. That'd be great. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Yes, Tina? Oh, hand went down. All right. if anyone has any comments, I think the hand raise feature seems to work fairly well. So I'll try to call on people. Oh, Tina, are you ready?
I'm so
Cool.
sorry. I was
Thank you.
muted. I
Oh,
apologize. Yeah, I just got the postcard inviting participation in this
okay.
just a few days ago. So I haven't had a chance to review the whole draft either. And I feel the same, like I'd like a little time. I'll make it work till Thursday, but I'd like to be able to look at everything to see if I have either questions or ideas that are not covered.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then hopefully this overview of what's the content in the document can help kind of guide your review as well, if that helps at all, this overview as we're going. All right. So this is chapter 2, which is the County Drought and Water Shortage Task Force. And this is the same content that is within the charter that is posted on the website as well. So it echoes the roles and responsibilities for the Water Shortage Task Force, the Project Coordination Team, or PCT, comprised of county staff. And it also includes an engagement and communications framework describing engagement, including development of the county website, which everyone I think has visited to join this meeting, and then also join the task force. And then public engagement, briefing to the Board of Supervisors, and then collaboration with any relevant agencies. So that this content, as I said, is also in the charter and helps define the role of the task force. And thank you for your participation in the task force. And that is the content in chapter 2. So I'm going to pass it over to Emily.
Tina, do you still have a question or oh, okay. And it looks like John has his hand raised as well.
Yeah, hey, my question was just for Tina. Tina, are you a domestic well owner? Did you just
Yes.
receive one of our postcards? Okay.
Yes, we got 2 cards. One went to my mom who recently passed away, and then the other came to me. But I want my brother to join. He hasn't yet, but he is the one who oversees the wells on our ranch, and he's a physicist, so he's got a lot of technical knowledge that I don't have. But yeah, I just joined and I haven't had a chance to look at the whole draft yet.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Rena. So I'll go over the risk assessment. This is chapter 3. I know we went over the risk assessment during the last task force meeting, but I'll definitely do, walk through this chapter as a quick refresher, or in case some folks might have missed the last meeting. So the purpose of the risk assessment is to evaluate drought and water shortage risk, specifically for domestic well and state small water system users. And this was used to identify where these systems are most vulnerable and why. And then the risk assessment ultimately helped inform the development of the short-term response actions, which we'll go over in chapter 4, and then the long-term mitigation strategies in chapter 5. So the chapter summarizes key terminology in the context of drought resilience planning, and it also includes an overview of the risk assessment approach. So the risk assessment followed a structured kind of 4-step process. So the first was to describe the hazards. So providing an overview of drought, climate change, and water quality threats in Ventura County. The second was to define the community assets. So that's really providing an inventory of the domestic wells and state small water systems and where they're located. The third step is kind of the bulk of the risk assessment. So it's really conducting it to analyze vulnerability. And this was used using, as Sarah mentioned earlier, DWR's Water Shortage Vulnerability Explorer tool. And this was used to identify high-risk areas, understand the drivers of physical and social vulnerability. And then you'll see as I scroll through in the next few chapters or next few sections, this includes some map exports from the tool. And then lastly, this chapter also summarizes the risk assessment, including the physical and social vulnerability scores to help inform and prioritize the actions and strategies. So again, the full draft is available on the SB 552 website, so I won't go into every hazard in detail, but instead I'll focus more on the vulnerabilities related to these hazards in the following sections. So the hazards that we address here fall into several categories. So that includes water quality that impacts both surface water and groundwater sources, drought-related impacts. So we include, the cycles of drought in Ventura County, and then the compounded effects of climate change on water shortage risks. So the County Drought Resilience Plan centers on the communities that rely on domestic wells and state small water systems. This map shown here in 3-2 illustrates the distribution of wells. So that's shown in the circles, and then the state small water systems shown as these little blue diamonds here across the county. So for this section, I'll give a high-level overview of how we conducted the risk assessment. So the risk assessment was used the DWR's Water Shortage Vulnerability Explorer tool. It evaluates vulnerability for domestic wells and state small water systems by looking at both the physical and social vulnerability indicators. So we'll go over the physical vulnerability indicators first. And this table lists out each of those indicators. So for physical vulnerability, it looks at conditions that affect water reliability, and you'll notice that some indicators have different weights. So these weights were set to reflect which conditions have a stronger influence on water shortage vulnerability. And the highest weighted indicators, those with the ones of 5, include susceptibility of domestic wells going dry in groundwater basins, competing demand in fractured rock areas, reported household outages of domestic wells, and these represent, direct evidence of water supply stress. And then some other important indicators that I'll go into a little bit more in the following sections that are very applicable to the county and also have a relatively high weight include fractured rock geology, wildfire risk, aquifer water quality risk, saltwater intrusion, and chronic declining water levels. So table 3-2 here presents a high-level summary of the observed conditions relating to each of the physical vulnerability indicators for the county. And again, the more heavily weighted indicators are discussed in a little bit more detail in the following section, since they have a greater influence on the overall physical vulnerability score. And they are grouped by category. So there's climate change projections, current environmental conditions and events, infrastructure susceptibility, and record of shortage. So any questions on the physical indicators or the methodology before I go into some of the indicators in a little bit more detail?
Looks like Jennifer has her hand up. Is that still valid? Nope. Okay.
Yes, I do. Hi.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, this is Jennifer Lancaster. I'm with Cayugas Municipal Water District, and I was just looking at these vulnerability indicators, and I was wondering how you came up with the weighting. Just from my perspective, I would have expected to see the multiple dry years as being weighted higher than a 2, at least a 3, I would think, because, even though we don't serve any of these domestic or anything like that, I know that a lot of our purveyors do have wells in the area, and as the multiple dry year scenario increases, they have to use more of the groundwater, which of course could affect any small systems that are nearby. So I'm just wondering how you came up with the 2 for the multiple dry year scenario.
Yeah, I know, Sarah, if you're on the call, if you wanted to answer that.
Yeah, so back in 2018, we had a county drought advisory group. We worked with them to identify these indicators and the weights. These were more set thinking about the state as a whole, but we do understand that some of these indicators might look different at the county scale or even a more local scale than that. But yeah, something I could suggest is, if the county was to do this again, we do document how we did this entire analysis. So you could always do your own analysis and, change the weights. But yeah, originally this was kind of meant for the entire state. So that could be why it's a little lower than some of the other ones.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so now going into some of the indicators in a little bit more detail here. So one of the key indicators of physical vulnerability was the presence of fractured rock areas, which are, as you can see, kind of scattered throughout the county, particularly near Ojai and Ventura River Valley regions. And water supply in fractured rock areas is harder to monitor and less predictable. And these make, this area is more prone to water shortages, and fractured rock again, is one of the highest weighted physical vulnerability indicators. Next is wildfire risk. The county also faces relatively high wildfire risk, with almost the entire county classified as having high or very high wildfire hazard potential. We've seen, several major fires in recent years, and they damage both natural and built water infrastructure, disrupt supply. So wildfire, again, is a pretty major driver of water shortage vulnerability in the county. Next is water quality aquifer risk. So another important factor is the potential groundwater quality risk. So this is based on the State Water Board's Safer Needs Assessment, and identifies where groundwater may pose higher risk of contamination. So in Ventura County, water quality risks are especially noted in the southern central region around the Santa Clara River Valley, Oxnard basins, and poor groundwater quality again reduces the amount of usable water available and heightens vulnerability during drought. And the next, considering Ventura's geographical location, saltwater intrusion poses a significant challenge along the coast. And so when groundwater level drops, seawater can encroach into these coastal aquifers. So this model data shows intrusion risk throughout the coastal zones. And the next is chronic declining water levels. So it also evaluated the long-term groundwater level trends from 2003 to 2023. So several areas, particularly in the south central region of the county, show chronic declines of more than 2.5 feet. And again, these declines really reduce the resilience of water systems, especially domestic wells with shallower depths. So basins around this area are considered critically overdrafted, which again increases vulnerability during drought. And then the next indicator is the extent of irrigated agriculture, which is heavily concentrated in the Oxnard Plain and Santa Clara River Valley. Agriculture is a major water user, and high agricultural demand puts additional pressure on groundwater. So, this increases the likelihood of shortages for domestic wells and state small water systems located in these areas. And then the next indicator is domestic well susceptibility. This analysis estimates where domestic wells may go dry if recent groundwater trend continues. It combines domestic well locations, well depths, and recent groundwater level trends. You can see countywide susceptibility is generally low, but there are still a few pockets of concern. And in these basins, groundwater declines may make some wells more likely to go dry if current groundwater level trends continue. And then next is competing demand in fractured rock areas. So where groundwater level monitoring isn't as prevalent, and especially in fractured rock, risk is assessed by domestic well density. So again, while countywide, there's relatively low competing demand, there's some pockets with higher well density, in this darker red squares here, that can lead to more competition for more limited groundwater supplies. Next, we looked at the reported household well outages, and this comes from the state's dry well reporting system. And as of 2024, there has been no reported outages in the county. So any questions again on the physical vulnerability indicators? And I think Rena had mentioned this earlier, but the county's SB 552 includes not only this draft DRP, but it provides the links to DWR's water shortage vulnerability tool, and its methodology too. All very helpful resources if you wanted to review some of that background information and those indicators in a bit more detail.
We do have a question from Supervisor Long.
Hi, yes, Emily, I appreciate the information. I was listening in, just curious, have you been reviewing the GSPs from the different GSAs that are all around? I understand you're talking about the state level, but we just have a lot of really good knowledge. Appreciate Cayugas and United being on, but we've got a lot of resources from Fox Canyon, Piru, Fillmore GSAs, Mound, so forth. So I just wanted to know.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Supervisor Kelly Long. We do include like a summary of some of those findings in Chapter 1 that kind of address the kind of the background information and the risk analysis that each of those GSPs have conducted. So we wanted to make sure to include that. And in the implementation section of the DRP, we also want to make sure that, recommendations here are kind of in, work in parallel or work together with some of those existing GSPs.
Okay, and then, yes, I just think that is extremely important. And then we have two that are in adjudication, so we need to make sure that we're providing that data too. I appreciate it. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have another question from Ron.
Yeah, I saw your map on the seawater intrusion vulnerability assessment. I was just wondering, we have lots of local data on the extent of seawater intrusion, upper aquifer system, lower aquifer system, so it's kind of complicated. I'm not sure your map quite captures that. It looks like it's mostly the grid cells, along the coastline. Is that just a statewide assessment and that's what you're going to use, or is there some opportunity to use more local, more accurate data?
Sarah, feel free to jump in too. I believe this is the statewide data, but if there's local data sets that you think is more accurate that we should definitely, be showing, we're happy to incorporate that as well.
Yeah, this is a current coastal model for the state. But yeah, I also encourage using local data, if possible.
Okay, yeah, I'll provide some written comments. We have contour lines and a more accurate mapping of seawater intrusion, but I'll have to read through the document a little bit more, but I'll see what I can get here.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Bram. Okay. So taking all of those indicators into consideration, this figure here summarizes the overall physical vulnerability score with the darker shading equating to higher vulnerability. So higher vulnerability areas have tended to be around where the fractured rock regions in the central and southern parts of the county, areas with potential water quality concerns, and some areas with higher wildfire risk. So when we combine, let's see, next figure here. When we combine the physical vulnerability with domestic well density, which is shown here in 313, we can start to see areas that have high density of domestic wells and high physical vulnerability. So that's shown in the darker brown colors. So again, physical vulnerability is kind of half of the picture. Social vulnerability tells us, who may lack resources or capacity to respond during water shortages. So these scores were calculated using US Census data at the block level. And this table lists the indicators used to develop the social vulnerability score. So it includes socioeconomic status, language and education, demographics, housing and transportation, and race and ethnicity. So this figure illustrates social vulnerability scores in Ventura County. The darker shades, again, indicate higher social vulnerability, and the results, again, are aggregated by census block group. And you can see some of the more populated areas of the county have higher social vulnerability. So bringing the physical and social vulnerability layers together, several regions were identified with the highest risks, and there are 7 regions, and those are listed here. And then if we go to the next spread here, So these are outlined in figures 315 and 316 with their corresponding letters. 315 is a summary of the risk assessment findings showing areas of water shortage vulnerability in domestic wells and state small water systems in the county. And then 316 is a summary of the social vulnerability score and the intersection with those areas with water shortage vulnerability. And then this table provides, again, a high-level summary of each of these areas with water shortage vulnerability, their key physical vulnerability indicators, and then the social vulnerability score. And again, we kind of talked about it a little bit too, but we recognize there might be potential gaps in the risk assessment. So if there's anything that is missing or there's better, localized data that we can use, we can make sure that we include that here. Any questions on the risk assessment process and findings before we move on to chapter 4?
No questions yet.
Great, thanks, Shauna. Okay, so on to chapter 4, which is the short-term response actions. So the short-term response actions are designed to mitigate impacts during a drought water shortage and throughout a drought water shortage event. So these actions are intended to be taken immediately when a or drought and water shortage emergency is happening or right about to happen. So this chapter outlines those actions, including the legislative direction. So per SB 552, the plan must consider at a minimum the provision of emergency and interim drinking water solutions. So the short-term response actions were identified by county, as well as the lead and supporting agencies are summarized in table 4-1. And so the county identified 3 key short-term response actions, and they relate to individual emergency preparedness, state small water system intertie coordination, and expedited well permitting. So for the first action, it involves the county continuing to share educational resources. This includes a list of state-regulated water haulers to help domestic well users and state small water systems, know what resources are available when there is a potential shortage. The second one is interties, so the county to help provide information and help coordinate temporary interties between state small water systems and or public water systems when a water shortage occurs. And then lastly is permit streamlining and coordination, so continuing to expedite permits for replacement wells and system modifications for state small water systems during a water shortage event. And again, the subsequent sections here kind of go into each of these in a little bit more detail and provide a bit more context. But any questions on chapter 4 before we kind of move into the long-term mitigation strategies?
Tina has a question.
Yes, thank you. On that last page, the third item that you had was for small water systems, but it didn't say that the expedited well permitting would be for individual wells. Is there a reason that it's just for the small systems and not for an individual well? Like I'm thinking in terms of a wildfire, for example.
I think it was intended to include the domestic well, so that might be a typo on our end. And John, yes, do you want to answer?
Yeah, hi Tina. We had discussions about this prior to making the document available to the public. The county has exercised this, while it's not codified anywhere, the county's exercised this capability in the past, wherein following a natural disaster or something like wildfire, we can and will expedite folks that have been impacted and have lost the ability to extract groundwater, should that be their primary source of potable water. So rest assured, when in the face of that disaster, and historically we have expedited those impacted, and it does include domestic wells.
Yeah, it was our experience when the Green Meadow fire burned that we lost the home in 1993. That we were able to get that help, and even had lost a water system earlier in the early 1970s to wildfire. And always your county department has been wonderful. I think Barbara is the person that we dealt with, for the wells. But I just think if you're making a document, you're making a plan and something is omitted, there may be a belief later down the road that the omission was done for a reason. And so if the thought is to include them, I think it's better that the plan includes them.
Yeah, absolutely. We can include that to cover the domestic well owners as well.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, John. Yeah, we'll be sure to include that in the short-term response actions to reflect that. Was there any other questions for this chapter?
I don't see any other questions.
Okay, thank you, Shauna. Okay, so now to chapter 5, which is the long-term mitigation strategies and action. So these strategies are designed to reduce the vulnerability of domestic wells and state small water systems in the long run. So per SB 552, the DRP at a minimum needs to consider consolidation for existing water systems and domestic wells and domestic well drinking water mitigation programs. So table 5-1 outlines the long-term mitigation strategies as well as the lead and supporting agencies. And again, this chapter goes into a little bit more detail about each of them. But we've organized the strategies into 4 main categories. So first one being domestic well drinking water mitigation programs. And this is a series of coordinated efforts that are intended to reduce the vulnerability of domestic wells and state small water systems to water supply shortages. System consolidation, so supporting the physical or managerial joining of 2 or more systems that could include domestic wells or state small water systems. Next is regional water infrastructure investment, so participation in larger water supply projects that would benefit domestic wells and state small water systems. And then lastly, addressing data gaps, so improving planning, forecasting, and monitoring of domestic well and state small water system supplies. So the county identified 9 long-term mitigation strategies and actions, and I can kind of briefly walk through them each. So under the first category, which is the domestic well drinking water mitigation programs, the first one is updating the drought resilience plan risk assessment, so what we had just discussed in chapter 3. So this will entail reviewing and updating the county's risk assessment as needed to incorporate new data and updates to the water shortage vulnerability explorer tool and or local data, local tools. The next one is supporting aging infrastructure, so providing educational resources to domestic wells and state small water system users on rehabilitating or replacing aging infrastructure. The third is promoting point of use treatment options, so sharing information on point of use treatment technologies for domestic wells and state small water users. And then the fourth one is expanding communication and engagement. So collaborating with GSAs, watershed conservation districts, and other agencies to deliver appropriate outreach, addressing factors that contribute to water shortages. The next category is regional water infrastructure investment. So the first one is flood management projects, working county to work with integrated regional water management programs, flood agencies, and GSAs to identify how flood management programs and projects could enhance water supply resilience. The next one is integrating the drought resilience plan into hazard mitigation planning. So incorporating interagency roles, responsibilities, and other drought resilience plan related actions into potential updates of the county's multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan and related documents. The next is system consolidation. So considering, potential consolidation opportunities, the county to support, continuing evaluating feasibility of system consolidations for domestic wells and state small water system communities and helping identify funding sources. I do see a hand up from Tina.
I'm sorry, I keep raising my hand, but
oh no, we love it.
Is there any part in the plan that I haven't seen yet? Because I'm going through it with you, so maybe it's up, that has to do with how to build catchment basins and try to reduce stormwater runoff and collect the rainwater in place to recharge groundwater systems, including beavers. I know it sounds funny, but beavers can help improve not just fire protection, but they can improve groundwater because they create catchment basins.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. I don't think we went into that level of granularity, but I think that probably would fall under regional water infrastructure investments, so like regional projects and how that could contribute to, groundwater recharge. So I think that's something we can mention and talk a little bit more about in this plan. Did the
Thank you.
county have any other input on that specifically?
Hey Tina, this is John with the groundwater section again. If you want to discuss stormwater catchment and modifying the hydrology of a site or your property, I can put you in touch with our county stormwater program. But typically, groundwater recharge is handled at the state level. There would be something referred to as a anti-degradation analysis and things like that, just to make sure that what you're trying to recharge isn't going to have a negative impact on groundwater resources. But I can post my contact, or I believe my contact was early on in the presentation, and I can put you in touch with our county stormwater program should you want to, build catchment basins or things like that relating to stormwater on your property or project.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Great, thank you, John. Okay, I think we left off at system consolidations. So continuing to evaluate the feasibility of system consolidations for domestic wells and state small water system communities and helping identify potential funding sources. And then lastly, our data gaps. So first one is integrating dry well reporting. So considering including dry well reporting as part of the replacement well permitting process to better understand where wells are going dry. And then next is groundwater monitoring in fracture rock areas. As we mentioned in the risk assessment, a big part of the county is in fracture rock areas. So providing education and resources on available groundwater monitoring tools for domestic well and state small water system owners in fracture rock regions can help better, monitor groundwater level trends. Okay, any questions on the long-term mitigation strategies?
Supervisor Long has her hand up.
Yes.
Hi, just a clarification. We have quite a few domestic wells that are in the El Rio, Nyland, Acres, Strickland area, which is unincorporated, and wondered if this would be one of those long-term programs to build a water district so that they have two ways of getting water in or out in case of a drought or nitrates or something of that nature. Water quality.
Sorry, what area did you say?
It's Nyland Acres, El Rio,
Okay.
Strickland.
Yeah.
Because that's a long-term project to get domestic wells. It's right by Oxnard and so forth. And it cost a lot of money to put all that together. So I'm just wondering if that would be a good long-term plan for that area.
Did the county have any input on that?
Yeah, thanks, Supervisor Long. I believe there is a mutual water company out there called Nyland Acres Mutual that
Yes,
does. I'm not sure what
there's quite a few of them, and we've been working with our public works for a long time trying to create a district or something so that there's about 10 or 12 different mutuals, you would say, that have one well that we're trying to put together, like Rio Mesa High School. There's a bunch of them. And so the issue with that is infrastructure. It's just thought of an idea, so wanted to throw it out there. Thank you.
to sort of further consolidate those smaller.
Yes, because
understand.
that's what they need. And the amount of money it would cost for ratepayers to actually get that done is in a disadvantaged community is not something people are stepping up to get done.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in the later section of this chapter, we do talk a little bit more about potential system consolidation opportunities. And so if that is an area that wants to be prioritized, and if funding, the part of this document is also to help get funding. So if we, identify that in this plan, that could also be beneficial.
There are several hands up. I'm just going to go in alphabetical order because that's how it's listed. Brum?
Okay.
Oh, am I good to go?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Supervisor Long's question or comment real quick. I know United Water is involved in a consolidation effort for small water mutuals in the El Rio area. There's the school districts and some smaller mutuals that are looking into consolidation. I don't know all the details, but feel free to reach out to Mariam or AGM or to our engineering department if you want a little bit more on what's going on there and the timeline. And I believe the county is involved also.
Yes, thank you. I just feel any way that we can all get together to get more funding for that would be fabulous. Thanks.
Right.
All right. Sarah Coe has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on some of the comments so far. From a state perspective, we are looking at these plans for different needs from the counties. So we do encourage highlighting any current projects or any so yeah, like the consolidation, just so we have an understanding of what the counties need. So should funding come up, at least we know some of the issues that are going on. And it is also good to have this documented. So when funding does occur, you already have it documented. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
Supervisor Long, do you have another question? Oh, there are no more questions.
All right.
Hey,
Thank
Emily,
you.
can I jump in really quick? I'm not sure how to raise my hand as a panelist, but this is Kim Delacorte from OES. Sarah, I was intrigued by what you just said. I'm getting ready to launch the 2027 Hazard Mitigation Plan update, and I was thinking how this could possibly, tie into something that our consultants would lead us to decide on as a project if our vulnerability and hazard research promotes that. But what I heard you say is adding it into a plan like this would be beneficial. Would you recommend doing that over the hazard mitigation plan? Or would you recommend doing both? What is the state looking at as far as what puts us in the best position for funding?
Yeah, so for that, I can't really say like which one's better than the other, but we have seen a lot of counties, they may have this as a separate document, but they might fold in information from this plan into their hazard mitigation plan update or add the plan as an appendix. Um, it's kind of more if the county feels like it works best, being a part of that plan. Um, and just a quick plug, we do have what we call a county cafe series, and it's geared towards the counties working on these plans. But we will have some presenters from other counties. We have San Luis Obispo and San Mateo presenting tomorrow. So San Luis Obispo is actually incorporating their plan into their local hazard mitigation plan. So that might be a good example of how they're doing that. And then San Mateo's incorporating it into their general plan. There's nothing in the legislation that really says this needs to be a part of another plan, but we do encourage to align it with the other plans that are in the county. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kim.
Don't see any other questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Shauna. I'll pass it back to Reina to go over the last chapter,
Great.
implementation.
Thank you, Emily. So I'm just going to review the content in Chapter 6, Implementation Considerations, which I think piggybacks on a lot of the conversation that we've had so far in the meeting as well. just providing some background on the legislative direction. This fulfills the requirement of SB 552 to include an analysis of the steps necessary to implement the plan, and then also an analysis of local, state, and federal funding sources available to implement the plan. So this is a great natural kind of segue from the conversation we were just having. So this section includes what we're calling an implementation roadmap. And it includes a table outlining activities that that lead agencies can implement to help with supply monitoring and interagency collaboration to support the implementation of the drought resilience plan. So activities that are included are task force meetings, continuing, also looking at water supply monitoring coordination, and that would be, and then also coordination, as Supervisor Long was mentioning, with GSAs is mentioned here in this table as a continuing ongoing activity. And then also website updates, integrating the most recent information on droughts and resources that are mentioned in the short-term and long-term actions to help disseminate information. And then to help define the responsibilities and resource needs, this table 6-2 includes on the farthest left side the short-term and long-term actions, summarizing what's in the tables from chapters 4 and 5, then the agencies lead and supporting, and then also status, so kind of like availability of the action to be taken, and then defines what kind of additional resource requirements might be needed, including staff time, county budget, and outside funds. So this helps define where we're going and how the county, or where the county is going, and then how a proposed approach, how to get there with these actions and strategies. And then this table here in section 6.3 for policy alignment and implementation helps define the alignment of the drought resilience plan with other existing county planning efforts. And so this piggybacks on what Kim was mentioning about the hazard mitigation plan being updated as well. So this shows how the drought resilience plan fits in with the priorities outlined in these existing plans within the county, including groundwater sustainability plans as well, as mentioned earlier about tying those efforts in. And then this can, yep, thanks. And then also this section includes an adaptive management for the county drought resilience plan. So the idea being that this plan can be updated periodically as appropriate and relevant, and that the county DRP will undergo review within 180 days of activation in response to local drought proclamation. So and then also the last section is funding opportunity and assistance programs, which are outlined in this table, the final table, I think, in the DRP, which includes what agencies funding might be available, the kind of programs and descriptions. This is always subject to revision and change, but these are examples and kind of first and opportunities to look for funding as it becomes available. And then at the end of the document are references, and then there's also an Appendix A, which is at the conclusion. Thank you, Emily, for all your scrolling, which is the water shortage emergency response process, which just outlines different ways to look at how a water shortage is occurring, and by looking at different indicators and classifying it as either a warning, like a readiness stage, which is if there's no drought indicated, a warning stage, and then an emergency stage. And then, so that's outlined here of different indicators. And then we also have this in our slide deck about the table A-2, which is the water shortage emergency response process. And what we want to highlight on this meeting, as it's the task force meeting, is task force engagement as the process moves forward. So during the readiness stage, which no major drought, there would still be annual task force meetings to discuss the county drought resilience plan implementation and to review water supply health. And then during the warning stage, which is drought or other hazard is occurring that could cause a water shortage emergency, there would be as needed drought task force meetings called. And then during the emergency stage at the bottom is the water shortage is occurring or imminent, and there would also be task force meetings held during that time as well for the task force to help provide direction during those situations. So that's the implementation chapter. I want to open the floor to see if there are any questions or feedback or ideas of, on Appendix A, of the implementation of the DRP.
A question came through the Q&A
Oh, sure.
about who the best contact at the county to discuss system consolidation. I don't know that personally right now, but if we get it before the end of this, I'll post it. If not, I'll send it out
Thank you.
to Jennifer to answer that question.
Thank you, Shauna. Great. All right. Are there any, I know I just solicited feedback on chapter 6, and we've been getting some great thoughts and feedback throughout the review of the DRP as well. Are there any other high-level questions or concerns or opportunities to further bolster the DRP that the task force might have identified within this time? And I know we're anticipating getting some written comments by COB Thursday that we can incorporate as well. Great. With that, I think the last slide that we had was just showing examples of task force engagement and then resources, wanting to highlight that there are a lot of resources available. The first link here is the Ventura County SB 552 website. And I did want to mention that the meeting one is the first task force meeting is recorded there, because I know we have some new participants on the line for this meeting. So if you would like to go back and review the content that was reviewed so far, that might be a helpful resource. And then also the slide deck for that is available. The charter is posted on the website, and then the DRP the drought resilience plan is also posted there. And then if anyone has any questions on the vulnerability tool, there's a link there that includes the methodology, which is detailed and could provide good context for any kind of questions about the water shortage vulnerability explorer tool. And then there's a guidebook on the drought resilience plan. And then questions or concerns can go to the drought resilience plan email that is listed here. And then I know Sarah also mentioned that the County Cafe series is ongoing and a good resource for counties that are interested. So just want to also flag that as a good resource. So that being said, just one more ask if there are any questions before I pass it over to the county to kind of for the final wrap up and discussing next steps with the remaining time. Not seeing any hands, I think I'll pass it on over to the county.
All right, thank you, Rena and Emily. That was very thorough, and appreciate everybody who jumped on, who had some expertise in the area. Want to thank our Ventura County Supervisor Kelly Long for jumping on. I noticed some of her staff here as well. And so we promised a meeting being open till 12, so that's what we're going to do in case anybody wants to hop on. In the question and answer, I did post through Jennifer's question, thank you, the website, so that's a direct link for you there. Also have provided that email address in an earlier question for you to continue to provide feedback through Thursday, end of business. Is that what we agreed on? Okay, wonderful. All right, so we're going to hang out. Anybody who pops in, we'll check in with you and be glad to go over whatever you missed or whatever you'd like to discuss. And so probably turn our cameras off, but we'll keep checking back to see if anyone pops in. Anything else before we move forward? All right, well, thank you again to those who popped in and are making an effort to give us some very important feedback. Appreciate that.
All right, it looks like we're about 12 o'clock. We've received no other questions. I do have an answer. I'll send this to Jennifer Lancaster, but I'm saying it now, so that's for the recording. I reached out to some contacts, and it looks like LAFCO would be the best person to contact, not necessarily from the county, but for just water consolidation in general. So I will be sending that information over to Jennifer Lancaster. And we're seconds away from 12 o'clock. So at 12 o'clock, we're going to sign off. Thank you, everybody that participated. Thank you, anybody that's watching. Please send questions to the email on the website that you use to get to these recordings. And we look forward to hearing from you. And we will be posting the finalized drought resiliency plan towards the end of the month. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the recording.